Hello.
Hello, how are you, Suzanne?
I'm good. This is my great friend over here, this way, Karla Stuebing. Yeah, I know you have to point the other way. Yeah,
I
we can
know, it's
touch
mirrored.
fingers. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Karla lives in Houston, Texas. It's very humid there
It
and
is.
warm. And she lives just north of where my son lives in Clear Lake Shores in Texas. Karla and I met about 2016. Was that when
Yes,
you were at Stitches? She taught
yes.
class at Stitches West I went to Stitches West. I signed up for the class and it was about color pooling and I wanted to learn more about that. And it was such a fascinating, and she was teaching two sections of it. And I only signed up for one section of it because there was another class I wanted to take during her second section. But the first section was so awesome, and I became so addicted to it so quickly that I went to the office and I canceled my other class and signed up for the second portion of her class. And I'm
I
so
had
glad
forgotten
I
that.
did because it was well worth it. So Karla does not sell patterns. She doesn't write books. She doesn't go around teaching at retreats and things, although it would be lovely if she did. But she has the most unique mindset on how she comes to knitting and playing with color. And I think that you're going to really, really enjoy this. So it's different, and I think a lot of you have probably never been exposed to anything like this. I've never seen this kind of work anywhere else, and it's absolutely fantastic. So first,
Thank
let's
you.
just see who's on here already today so I can say hi to you. So there's Evelyn. Hello, Evelyn. And Emily Beaton. Hello. Evelyn's from Bakersfield, my hometown. Emily Beaton is from Central Pennsylvania. Then there's Francoise. She's like my right hand man in helping writing patterns. She lives in Lyon, France. Kelly,
Mm.
my cat from New Hampshire. Marie Tobita from New York. Luana Hendricks from Missouri. And Gayanne Alexander from Corvallis, Oregon, Teresa Brown from Suitland, Maryland, Eric Joseph from Belgium, Sylvia Earle from Cameron Park, California, Rebecca Cinco from Florida, Susan Day from Newcastle, Washington, Fatima Dehan from Portugal. Hello, Fatima. Nada Hamid from Sultanate, Oman. I'm not saying it correctly, I'm sure. MK from Brooklyn. Susan McBride from sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. But it's dry. It's a dry heat there, right? There's a big difference between humid heat and dry heat, but they're both hot. Karen Bassell from Washington. Frank HB from Hamilton, Ontario. The Loose 57 from Pennsylvania, Teresa Parmalee from Bakersfield, Francine, Mary Shue, Helen Henry, Cindy McBride, Wayne Newland, and more. So hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you.
Wow.
We have quite an international crowd. So I always start out by asking my guests the same question. That is, what brought you to knitting? How did you become interested in knitting? And then how did that lead to your interest in planned pooling, Karla?
Um, could you say a word about my internet problem
Oh,
first,
yes,
just to let
before we
people
start,
know?
we've been having internet issues right now, and hers is fluctuating. If it goes out, hold on, don't go anywhere. I'll just call her back and she comes right back on. So that
Yes,
may
thank
happen.
you.
And now that we've said it, it probably won't happen. So there you
Oh, I
go.
hope not.
Okay.
Okay, so as with many people, I came from a family where all of the grandmothers and aunts and my mother, everyone was a needlewoman. And so my mother's mother taught me to crochet. That's what I learned first at about 6, probably, with the tiny little thread and the little steel hook at that age. It was that was the beginning. She also, I was an early and voracious reader, and my grandmother had copies of Work Basket. It was an
Oh,
old, do you know that
mm-hmm.
publication
Yep,
from like the
yep,
30s, 40s?
yeah.
She had stacks of those, and when I went to Grandma's house, I just perused patterns, techniques, and McCall's Needlework and Crafts.
Mm-hmm.
Those were just, I would spend hours getting lost in those. So from an early age, I was learning lots of needle techniques and doing lots of needle techniques. I don't really know when I learned to knit. I think it was from a book in high school or middle school, but I learned how to knit and I knit poorly. But just did a lot of it. And I as we haven't really talked about, knitting is my avocation. I was a fine arts major in undergraduate, but then later went to graduate school and became a psychologist. And my specialty in psychology was measurement and statistics. So I always attributed my success at coding, computer coding, programming, from reading Workbasket.
Really?
And needlework and crafts, reading, knitting, and crochet programs. Oh, patterns, not
Patterns.
programs. From the time I was 6. So,
It taught your
um,
brain. It taught your brain to accept the symbols and the relationships of the symbols
yeah,
and stuff. Yes.
yeah. Well, the symbols, the relationships, the do loops that are inside every pattern where it says go to the asterisk, back and repeat until you get to the end. That's just a do loop, which in programming.
Right.
So that was my kind of technical background. And then, as I said, I was a painting major in college. So I've always been in visual kinds of things.
So, when did you start thinking or playing with planned pooling? How did that come
Um,
about?
2009. I can place it, October of 2009, because of a pattern in Knitty called Sweet Spot. Um,
Let me
are you
show
going to?
that.
Yeah. This was by a pattern by, oh, wait, I think we've frozen.
It's by Winnietta Prescott in Knitty Magazine. Whoops, we've got to call her back. She's disconnected. Hold on. She'll be back. It takes a second. Sorry. Just hang in there. I think it's that humidity in Houston. It's killing her internet line. So, this article in Knitty is what she first found that inspired her with the planned pooling. And this came out in, is there a date on it? Fall of 2009. And it's by Winnietta Prescott. Here she comes. Hello, we're back.
Did you get to show them the picture of the sweet spot while I was gone?
I'm
Uh,
showing them the article. So
Good.
okay, so the sweet spot scarf. So here you go. You can carry on now.
Okay, so I was just grabbed by this, the picture here, and saw this wonderful patterning happening with knitting. And then I read about it. In this particular project, Juanietta used Knit One Below as her stitch. And I read it and thought, okay, I'm going to learn how to do this. I'll go find some variegated yarn and I'll use Knit One Below because that must be the only way it works. And I played with it. And she explained that you have to find the sweet spot in terms of number of stitches. So what I learned right away from her article was that this technique kind of turns your typical starting point for knitting on its head, because instead of starting with a given number of stitches, you start with a skein of yarn that has a given color repeat, a length of color cycle or repeat, and then you tailor the number of stitches to take advantage of the color repeats so that they show up as patterning. So it was just a very counterintuitive way of thinking about starting out a knitting project, where you have to figure out the number of stitches. As you can see from this wonderful, all these photos, she had lots and lots of different sock yarns that she was knitting here, and assembled them into kind of a collage where all of the individual rectangles have this kind of what we call an argyle. It's not a true argyle, but we call this one an argyle design. It also kind of shows, interestingly, that most skeins are about the same diameter, that they're wound to be about the same length, which you probably knew that forever, but that was not something I knew.
Yeah, most mills or people, designers, use about the same circumference, but there are some that are off. Yeah.
Yes. I'm jumping ahead here, but I found one of my first yarns I used was a Misty Alpaca sock yarn that took 320 stitches to get all the way around the color sequence.
Wow.
That was a frustrating thing to figure out.
Yes, I can imagine.
So with this wonderful article in my back pocket, I picked up all of the variegated yarns I could find in my stash, and then that I could find at the store for not a lot of money because I didn't want to invest a lot to begin with. And I started to start knitting and say, what kind of pattern, asking myself kind of an experimental question, what kind of pattern do I get with 20 stitches, with 21 stitches, with 22? Because Juanietta had said in her article that it doesn't take many stitches for the pattern to emerge or disappear. And then I got really frustrated with that. I thought, this is too much knitting. And because in my day job as a statistician, one of the tools that we use a lot is simulation, where you take the characteristics of some phenomenon you want to study, you simulate it to figure out what its properties are under different situations. So I said, aha, I will simulate a ball of yarn, and I'm not even going to go into how, but I'll simulate a ball of yarn and then graph it out the way it would look as if it was knitted. So that was my leap and into the deep dark hole of plan pooling. And so are we showing the plan pooling website right now?
Yes, yes.
Yes, so I was, we had a plan pooling group on Ravelry, and I was a moderator on it, and I shared a lot of my pooled projects and also my simulation. And the husband of one of the members of the group put it together into the programming that I had, the concept, the approach to it I had done, and made a website that Suzanne is showing you right now. This is how you can take, and in this case, this would be a simple skein of yarn where one half of it is kind of orchid or lilac and one half is blue. Like if you had an orchid skein of yarn and dipped one end of it into blue so that it was about um, not quite half and half. This shows you that with a different number of stitches, the design would change. Is this live right now, Suzanne?
Yes.
Is it? Can you change the number of stitches? Do you see where it says
Yes.
one stitch more?
Yes.
Add a stitch.
Okay.
Like
Let me
up
see.
at the top, I think.
Okay, so I'm going to put 52. Okay.
Okay, 52.
And that's what happened when I made 52.
Okay, so do you see right above that where it says one stitch
Oh,
more or something like
yes.
that?
Uh-huh.
Okay, if you just start clicking.
Oh, let me get
on-
back to 51 so we have our
Okay,
pattern. And then I'll do that.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just,
Okay, so one stitch longer.
yeah, and just keep clicking so people can go through it and see how the patterning changes.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it really is. This was stunning when I started creating the plots for this, for me to look
Wow.
at. Oh, some of these are so cool. I've tried doing dyeing, but I am not a dyer. I am not an accurate dyer, so I haven't been able to recreate some of these things. But boy, any of you out there who are dyers, get in touch because we could make some pretty things. Anyway, this shows you kind of what you can come up with given a dye pattern, a skein length, and a number of stitches.
So this is simply, every time I click this, I'm adding one more stitch to the row.
Yeah. What are we up to now? I can't really.
83.
Okay. And with a really simple design like this, you get very simple patterns, but most yarns are more complicated than this.
Let's add another color.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so let's add, let's make that a different.
This now is a yarn that's dyed in the round. Suzanne, you probably know how they do this, like dip dyeing maybe,
right.
Or when you have an odd number of colors like this, it has to be dyed in the round or machine, like printed onto the yarn. Mm-hmm. Usually when people are hand painting them, they spread the dye across the skein, and that always ends up with dyed across the skein. It's always going to be an even number of colors.
Now, I want to, let's add another color. Let's add the blue. Let's make the, well, let's quit this and go back and talk about some of the skeins, what they look like, okay?
Okay, that's fine. And actually, this is such a rabbit hole, and this works really well on your phone. And we'll talk about later about how I've used this doing designs. So, yes, shall we move on? What do you want to move to?
Let's go to this one here, where some of your samples.
Okay, I'm going to tell people that this was a PowerPoint that I used in the class that Suzanne was talking about. So the cover here is just a collage of a lot of the, or just a small sample of the examples of plan pooling using what I call a collage technique. And that's just kind of an overview. This whole deck of photos is not really organized for a class presentation. It was intended to be just, a slideshow in the background. But
it shows possibilities, and there's some.
Oh, back up one. Oh, okay. Yeah. Back up one. Yes, right there. This is one skein. There are four. It looks like four horizontal blocks. That is the same skein used at a different starting point in the color cycle. And then if you go to I took a picture of that because I only had one skein. I couldn't do a whole project. So can you go to the next slide? What I did was take that image and then repeat it in like a Photoshop or a collage app on my phone, and just to to play with what you could do with repeating blocks, and this is the design. So what I'm trying to do is get things that are a little more organic than simple plaids.
Right.
Or simple, yeah. Because if you want to do a plaid, you might as well do intarsia.
Even if you did that one block and you used a photo app to make this collage and framed this and put it on the wall. I mean, it's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It's just
beautiful. Anyway, so
beautiful.
that's where I'm going. I'm trying to go for things that are a little more organic so that no point in duplicating something we already know how to do, like with intarsia or Fair Isle or something like that. Okay, so the next one here is a skein, and this one is I think it's Lorna's Laces Zombie Barbecue. And I really love this colorway because it has nice, distinct color changes. Like between the red and the blue, it's nice and distinct. And I also like it. It's dyed across the skein. So as you can see, the red matches the red on the other side of the skein. The blue matches the blue. And it's also symmetric. So it's symmetric across the skein. It's also symmetric side to side, which means you can do some nice patterning things with it. So this is the skein. This is one piece of the finished swatch, and this swatch is a big swatch, but where I changed the starting point in the skein a number of times. And this then is that block tiled together with rotation. So I'm also using a lot of quilt concepts here, where you have a quilt block that you then turn as you put it into the finished quilt. So I'm playing with that with these designs. This too is I love the colors in this. They just are so glowy, this skein. And this is an old yarn that I don't remember what it is, but I really wish I did. And here...
this is in seed stitch too.
It is in seed stitch, yeah. That was one of the things that I had to persuade myself was this works with basically any stitch where you use about the same amount of yarn on each row. I have examples where I used a different amount of yarn on each row, but we'll see that.
Right.
This is the yarn you just saw with a kind of a compatible colorway where I'm alternating about every 7 or 8 rows. This is seed stitch. And then we can go ahead.
So this is 2 different yarns.
It is 2 different yarns. But what I love about it, and this is not a very good collage, but I was just playing with how I could alter my arrangement to get just to get a different kind of look. I'm sad that I have all these white lines in between. This arrangement is what we call stacking, because with the argyle or the plaid, the color, every time you come back to it, like on the front side, it shifts over like a stitch or 2. That's what you aim for. With stacking, you try to have enough stitches so the colors stack right on top of each other. And that's what we're seeing here. And here we have a lot of these are my experiments in what kind of visual effects we can make. With,
and what I really like too is that the playing between the light and the dark. You know,
yeah.
You kind of have to look for that in your skeins too when you're looking for skeins. You have to have
exactly.
some variation in the darkness and lightness.
Yes. And with this skein, I wish I had the original skein here. I just don't. It's a very low contrast skein, which it's a little, you can kind of tell that there's a diamond shape here. This would make kind of an argyle shape. And it had rows with a lighter colorway interspersed in it. But then I think on the next one, you can see the next slide, you can see how it would look if you put a bunch of those together. And in this case, you just get a really nice, subtle kind of.
Argyle. Yeah, the Argyle's awesome here.
Yeah, it's subtle, it's rich, and it's fun to have the hugely bright colored contrast, especially when you're learning. And it's harder for you to see when the colors change, but I really like the result on this.
Oh.
This is 2 colorways. What I like here is that we've got 2 yarns that have some similar colors, but they have a very different rhythm, I call it, where the size of the color segment in that outer dark gray, light gray sections, it's very big. It's like just maybe 2 colors. Just one end is dark gray, one end is light. I'm not sure how it was in the skein. And then combining that with a skein with complementary colors, but with a kind of a faster rhythm where the colors change faster.
It's like a diamond.
What's that?
In the middle. It's just beautiful.
Thank you. So here's one square, and I think the next one might be what might this look like if we put several of these together.
Wow.
And you don't actually have to knit this as 3 squares and then sew them together. You just cast on, once you find your number of stitches, you cast on 3 times the number.
Right.
And then you're careful. All right,
okay, so
here
we have our first question here.
Okay.
This is from Fatima, and she says, the yarn used is dyed by you, or do you use commercial wool?
I use commercial. I don't dye. I tried it. I'm not good at it.
Oops, I lost my picture. It's okay, I'll get it back.
And actually, what I like about using what I find commercially is that it's taught me a lot about kind of the sample space, if you will, of all the yarn patterns that are out there. Some of them are very regular. Some of my projects I like the most are big box yarns. And what somebody explained to me is that a lot of those yarns are printed almost like printing a newspaper. Suzanne, do you know anything about that?
Yes, they are. In fact, like opal yarns, and there's a lot of the sock yarns, the ones that are self-striping. They are literally printed like a newspaper. There's a big, like a printing press machine, and all the strands are lined up next to each other, and all the color is applied systematically, so they exactly replicate. Exactly replicate. Whereas hand-dyed yarn, like
this technique,
like Blue Moon Fiber Arts yarn, is hand-dyed. It's not machine-dyed. So there's variations.
It's hand-dyed, but Tina's technique is so, she replicates her designs beautifully with color and with kind of the rhythm, the length of the colors. Because when you do a project where you're basing your design and you're on the specific pattern of the colors and you have to use 3 skeins, you hope they're going to be similar. And she's very good at that. Lorna's Laces is good that way, and Prism Yarns is good that way. There are a lot of wonderful hand-dyed yarns. 3 Irish girls, also love them. This is 2 yarns that were from Prism, and with these I move the yarn by cutting it. I learned this from finding a book on ECOT about weft weaving, where they had yarn that was dyed for the weft, and they would move the yarn back and forth through.
We froze. Let me call her back. Hold on, everybody. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. We did pretty good. We had a long stretch there without an interruption. Sounds like we're on sonar. Here she goes. Hello.
Hi, sorry about that, everybody.
Well, we made it really far before that happened.
I know.
We did good.
Good.
Okay, can you see everything?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Okay.
Okay, so I think we've covered that slide.
Okay, let me move next. Oh, so pretty.
Okay, so this one was two different colorways of, this was from Michael's. I think it's called Impeccable or something like that. And I just would knit like 5 garter ridges in one color and then 5 in the next. And wherever it ended up, I picked it up, just carrying it up the side, forced it to start in a new place when I did the next stripe. And I have a little bit bigger sample of this approach coming up, but this was one of the first experiments in that.
Whoops.
This was a knit one below using some cascade yarn, where here again I wanted it to be kind of organic and a little bit distressed looking. And this is a big swatch, and then I've electronically tiled it for the next, in a blanket I could foresee doing.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah, just again, using 2 different yarns and doing a stack approach, and trying to position it to get good contrasts at different points. And this is a baby blanket, just, I just was trying to get lots of patterning, lots of patterning happening. To me, it looks very tribal.
It does. It does. It looks like an Indian blanket.
Yeah. The next one is 2 colors of, I think it's Blue Moon Fiber Arts sock yarn, and just, as you can see on the colorway that has white in it, you can see I started it with, like in the middle of the white on one side, and then used the other yarn, and then did another row where white started, and then, so it's just a way of changing the rhythm of the stripes.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
I love this one because it really has the color contrast. I like the pop of it.
Right. I love the way the white shifts back and forth.
Yeah.
You've got the green up
and
the center.
A lot of these are just like invented on the needles with the yarn. So
exactly.
Yeah, the yarn just tells me. Okay, this skein, a local dyer in Houston made this, and she did a lot in dyeing this skein to try to make it very irregular. I opened up the skein with her permission, of course. Suzanne says, "Of course you should open the skein. You're buying it." But I could see that I had that one place. Maybe you can show it with the cursor where there's a white stripe.
Right one
you
here,
see
and there's
what's
here.
that? Yeah, right there, where there was a real regular place that I could use kind of as my North Star, if you will, where I could use that to make sure I was staying on track. And the rest of it was very irregular. So I think the next slide is a scarf I made using it. And what I like about this is that it has that speckly, it's kind of the plaid again, but it's much more like a night sky kind of.
It's soft.
Yeah, it's very soft. And I had two pieces like this and sewed them together and did a mohair I-cord around the edges and then put buttons on it. And it's a wonderful neck piece.
Wow.
But I don't have a picture of it now. This is just showing repeating a motif instead of doing the whole argyle or plaid or the whole zigzag, which you would get, just choosing a segment and then repeating it like you would do in a quilt and playing with that for design.
Oh, wow.
This is one where it was two skeins where I just kept striping it, doing about 5 garter ridges per for each skein, and then let the color shifts happen, because once I carried it up the side, I had used up some yarn, so it wouldn't start in the same place it did. So that's how you get all of the color shifts here. This is just a little sample of little V shapes. Let's just keep going because I'm talking a lot here. Little checkerboards within the diamond shape. This wrap I really love. It was 3 different colorways of cascade. I think that the kind of ovals around the around those is what I like. The next one shows a little better close up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I love that one.
Look at how you've got the 1 white stripe here and 2 stripes here and 2 stripes here. That's just amazing.
Yeah, see, it's because the skein has that big white chunk, and when it's on the edge, it's like folded in half, right?
Right.
Because it's at the end, and then it comes back and it ends at the same stitch it started on.
Wow. Oh.
And this is half linen. So I figured out how to find the sweet spot for half linen. And this actually, each stripe, these are all from the same skein, but there's a different color mix in, like, if you count from the left, on my screen anyway, it starts with blue on the top, and then the 4th one over is blue on the top, and then the 7th one is blue on the top. Well, those, I started in the same place, but by starting at a different place, like I did in columns 2, 5, and 8, you get a completely different look. Which, here again, I had 1 skein of this to play with, so. This will just keep moving because I love it, but, and this was, these are multiple skeins that happen. What I like is when colors, 2 skeins have a similar color that occur in the same place, as the pinkish colors do here. We're going to see that again. Yeah, this is a Blue Moon Fiber Arts dye pattern called Bag Lady. And what intrigued me about it was that almost half the skein was gray. And I knew that that was going to give me a section that could almost be like background. And then the rest of it was a little bit busy. And it had that one little, like 1 or 2 stitches of white that you can see make these little X's.
Wow. Oh, that's
and here, this is Bag Lady also. You can see the gray, there was lots of gray, and then the little pieces, the little bits of white to make the outlines, and then the big chunks of white in the middle. I don't even remember. Oh yeah, that one's Lorna's Laces. I'd love a blanket of that. Okay, this one is one of the first big projects I made where I had 7 different colorways of Wool of the Andes from Knit Picks. I don't know if they do variegateds anymore, but what I was very lucky once I started opening up the skeins, because I found out they had the same rhythm. So each skein had, let's say, 4 colors in its palette. It would have a very light, a medium color, and then a medium light, and then a dark. And they'd always be in almost the same lengths and in the same order. So what happens then when I make blocks here, and this is seed stitch too, I think the next one shows the blanket laid out, is that if you look at crossing the blanket, even as you cross colorways, the light is lined up.
The argyles are lined up, even though they're
lined
different
up.
colors.
They're from different skeins. Yeah.
Look at that. Amazing. Wow. But it looks like a watercolor.
What's that?
It looks like a watercolor. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. I love this blanket. I use it every night. This was, I can't remember the yarn, but what I remember about this was that it was two colors on each skein, and because of its simplicity, you actually have more flexibility with patterning. So the next slide shows what these what the kind of thing you can do with these.
Wow.
Isn't that fun? It's kind of a quilt concept again. This was the yarn that was in the middle of a piece we saw before. Yeah, we've just got, are we going back? No, that's,
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wow. So this just shows, I think it just shows the same yarn stacked with different stitches, what it looks like, and then what happens when you either add or subtract a stitch and the colors start shifting on every row. You can see the width is not that different. Just one stitch. Okay, let's just keep going. And here, this is one of the simplest ways to pattern, is with a yarn that has 2 colors and then just flip it. Start in the middle of one of the colors, do a block, and then switch and start in the middle of the next color. Of course, you have to have figured out your number of stitches. Okay, I was playing with collaging blocks using 2 different colorways. And then let's go to the next one. I chose a subset of that, a section I liked, and then in this one I actually almost have it done. I just played with pinwheeling the designs, or arranging them in different ways. I think we might have a couple different options on this one.
Wow.
Yeah, with these it was just, and here too it's like playing with quilt blocks.
Oh, that's a cutie.
Yeah, this one is, gosh, I think it's called, I don't know. It's a great big heavy cotton from Hobby Lobby, which looks really simple in that simple piece, but here too I tiled it virtually on my camera to see what it would look like. I think I used just a small part of it. And I actually have a piece that I've done that is that is this one, the slide you're showing right now. This, again, it's, one colorway plain, and I wanted it to be kind of organic, a little tribal. This one is kind of a flame design. It's just using the zig and the zag, just a small little piece of the zigzag that happens when you use half a skein for to get all the way for the width of your piece. You'll get a zigzag, but if you don't go all the way across the piece, you can just take fragments of it and then repeat them and do something like this. With the next one, here's the same yarn, but where I started out with if we think back to what it looked like on the app, where when you had the right number of stitches, you got a really strong pattern, but on the wrong number of stitches, it was kind of speckled and jumbled. So I intentionally on this started with a wrong number so that I could ease into, by adding on one end, ease into it just to see what kind of patterning. I still have to figure out a garment where I can use this.
It almost looks like it has a peace sign in the middle.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And that kind of oval curving shape. I love it.
I do too. By the way, I got to see almost all these pieces in person in her class, and the photos just don't do them justice. This piece was my favorite.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've got to figure out what to do with it. Okay, this, what I like about this is two colorways, and they both have a gray. They both have a yellow. One has ochre and one has peach. So you can see they're very compatible with each other. The size of the color segments is similar. And by lining them up, you can make more than you could with just using one color.
Wow.
Yeah, and this one is that strip, but combined, put together with a lot of more strips.
Just gorgeous.
Repeated. Oh, and this is one of my favorites. This yarn is discontinued. So many yarns. I buy one or two to try them out, see if I can make something with them. I play with it and say, ooh, I love this. I'm going to play with this, and which I made this swatch and then started playing with it, which we'll see on the next slide.
Oh, goodness.
That's one of my favorites because I love the geometry, the shapes for this.
Yes, that's awesome.
But that yarn's not available anymore. And this is using just a quarter of the total stitch count as the width of the piece, and then kind of knitting in a pinwheel. So you knit one square, you end it off, and then you start the next square, picking up stitches along the side, etc. It's a little bit of a log cabin concept, I guess. But as you can see, you can do this kind of thing with it.
Wow.
If you started blocking them all together.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
With this, I was playing with changing the pattern by intentionally knitting tighter and looser. So it's just a demonstration of doing that. I made it stack and then I shifted it so that the stacks happened at a different place. But I did that just by tightening it up or loosening it up. So there are different ways to reposition. This is just a skein. It has that beautiful bright yellow place, and I thought that might make a nice glowy kind of center for something. So my swatch on the next one is, yeah, don't really love it. Okay, now we're getting into one of my favorite yarns that Blue Moon Fiber Arts used to have big skeins of silk mo. That is mohair and silk, and here are two colorways that I think one of them is a Rhinebeck colorway. One might be called Dancing in the Moonlight or Dancing in the Dark, and then I think we have another skein after this. That is, yeah, this one's I think called Joy to the World. So I thought these three colorways went together really well, and I started playing with them. And this was just, I started just on the needles, started experimenting with what I could do with one of the colorways. Let's shift to the next one. And here's another one where I used two colorways with each other. I wasn't really happy. I thought it broke up too much, that strong contrast. So then let's think about that Plan Pooling website. What I did was, after I had worked on the needles with my yarn, I knew pretty much how many stitches I had of each color for each of my skeins, and I could plug it into the Plan Pooling site and then produce a graphic of it. and I would take a screenshot, or you can download the image if you want on the site, and then I'd go into Paint, just the free little Paint app you have on your laptop, and cut pieces. And my friend who's a quilter says, oh, that's called fussy cutting when you're a quilter. Do you know that? Like where you take just the piece you want and start putting the pieces together. So this was one of my, let me see, I could do this. This is 2 colorways combined. And let's go to the next one. And this is what it looked like when I did it, which it looked, obviously I didn't pick my colors perfectly, but it looked kind of good. But let's go to the next one. And then this one uses all 3 colorways to make this kind of big diamond shape. And let's go to the next. And here's what it looked like on the actual swatch. So let's keep going. Is that the end?
No.
Or do we have?
This is the last one.
Okay, so here is that diamond shape, but it's repeated. So now I'm thinking this is starting to look like I want it to look. It looks organic, it has richness of colors, and it doesn't look too lockstep. So is that the last one?
No, we have a picture of it hanging.
Oh yeah, I know, but that's on the next.
Yes.
That's on the next pictures.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, this is the final. So because you're limited by, you must use a certain number of stitches. You can see that section on the right hand is the piece that I just showed you at the end of the slideshow. And I had to make that long enough that I would end up picking up stitches on its side that would allow me to do patterning when I started knitting the other direction. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Suzanne, does that make sense to you?
Yes.
So you have to kind of keep track of multiples of numbers.
This is stunning.
And decide if it looks good. What's that?
This is stunning.
And then once I started with that left side, I went far enough that I had the right width that I could have the correct number to go across the top with that set of stripes.
Right here.
Yeah.
So it started with this piece.
It started with that big piece, yeah.
And then this piece.
And then I picked up along the side and did those with different colorways.
This piece.
Yes, exactly.
Beautiful. Now, do you have that to show?
I do. So it's big.
And it's light as air.
It is light as air. And it just is, it's just like air and dye. I mean, it's probably 5 feet by 6 feet, 4.5 by 6.5 feet, and weighs about 4 ounces.
Wow.
So it's mostly color, maybe it's 7 ounces. It's color and fuzz, and that's it.
Okay, I have a couple more questions for you.
Yeah.
This is from Evelyn. She says, have you ever made a sweater using this technique?
I've used this technique to make like a rectangular front or back of a sweater and then do shaping like gussets on the side.
Right.
The trick is this has to be rectangular, or as you saw in that one example, where it had the like bowed out and we had the oval. You can play with it a little bit, but it has to be rectangular. So, but
that's perfect for in Bakersfield where we live. It's like where you live, only it's not hot, and I mean it's not humid. Yes. You have the humidity. We wear a lot of tank tops, and short sleeve T-shirt type things where you can use a rectangular panel for the front and the back.
Exactly.
With a boat neck, and then just add your sleeves.
Yes. I really like wearing solid color tanks with kind of brightly patterned wraps.
Yes.
Or kimono style. I mean, the where I've gone and looking for garments is to look at kind of folkwear type garments. Any culture where people wove their own fabric and where every square inch of fabric was precious, they used rectangles.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I look at. And that usually means doing ponchos, doing kimonos, that
Right.
kind of thing.
So if you go to a hand weavers guild, and oftentimes when they have their show, they'll sell garments that they've made, and they're the same sort of thing. They're not going to cut their weaving. You know
Right,
what I mean?
exactly.
They use the whole thing. Here's another question from Fatima. She says, thanks for the Festival of Colors. I am fascinated with these combinations. I love play knitting with color. Is it possible to get patterns? Is it possible to get some online classes? She wants to learn how to do this.
Well, there is a lot on YouTube. I don't know that what there is there are a lot of YouTubes for doing this with crochet right now. So I think if you got the concept in crochet, I don't know if you crochet, Fatima, I'm sorry. But I don't know of any YouTubes. I'm trying to think if there are tutorials.
I don't know. I haven't.
Like I said, I don't write books.
Yeah.
You're
an artist.
I knit.
So let's go to this next picture.
Okay. Okay, here's a poncho. This is 2 colorways where I'm using, I use a lot of garter because I like the flatness of the fabric to begin with, but also because you have to keep such a consistent tension unless you intentionally shift your tension, that garter stitch is perfect because most people's knit and purl are different. They use different amounts of yarn. So something like garter or seed stitch works really well. So this is garter, and it uses 2 colorways with stripes of different sizes in the different sections of the poncho. So the poncho is just a 2 rectangle poncho, and it just kind of folds over. It's a little bit origami'd.
Here's a picture of you wearing it.
Yeah. Not a great the colors there, but all right, let's move forward.
Here's another one that's
Oh yeah. So this one also is 2 colorways of Blue Moon Fiber Arts, and what I loved, I thought these 2 went together really well. One is, kind of the lighter colors, and one has that wonderful charcoal with that one little stripe of white at one end of the skein. I was really intrigued with that, and I love what it did with the little sawtooth white at the
right in here.
That's kind of the middle. If you go to the end of that block, either end of it,
here,
see that light color white sawtooth?
Yes.
Yeah. So what I wanted to do with this was play with the patterns you could get by using a full width, which is one time around the skein goes from stitch 1 to stitch 84, and then you're back at the beginning. Oh dear.
Are you okay? Oops, I think she's stuck. Hold on. Hold on, everybody. Oh, she's back. You're back. You're back.
Hello? I'm back.
You're back.
I'm back. That was magic. Okay.
Yes.
And then the kind of square that makes the back of this wrap is, I think that one is 3/4 of the stitch cycle. You can always tell because it makes a diamond and a half when it's 3/4. Mm-hmm. And then the narrower bands, like you've got your cursor on one of the narrower ones right now, that's a 3/4. If you go to the outside edge
here,
Yeah, on the
Where
go
are you?
to the other, yeah, right there. That is the 1/2 width. It's just narrow. Or
This
maybe
way.
it
It's
might
right.
be a quarter. I bet it's a
Right.
quarter. And
Right.
then the whole edging is I-cord, and you just get that
Oh,
wonderful,
wow.
repeated, yeah.
I didn't even notice. It looks, that's beautiful. Looks like a snake skin.
Yeah,
I
but
like
that's the
that.
darker colorway. I-cord using the darker
Okay,
colorway.
here's a picture of you wearing it.
Yeah.
That's
So it's
beautiful.
not a sweater, but it's certainly wearable.
Hmm. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Okay. Oh, and this one is a fairly new wrap, and I actually have it with me, but it probably shows up better that way. Um, these are 3 skeins of, this is 3 Irish girls. And what I loved about these skeins, what really intrigued me, the top 2 have mostly dark, except for over on that left end that Suzanne is showing to you right now. So I've already played with yarns that are dyed that way, so I know kind of what I can do with them. And I wanted to make a wrap, a stole that used those to their advantage. And then that bottom skein is just, it's everywhere. It's very irregular, and so I wanted to kind of combine that. So with the more structured skeins. So
Ready?
let's see how it
Ready?
looks.
Ready to see it?
Yeah. Yeah. So
It's
these,
beautiful.
yeah, look at that bottom pattern and the top pattern. That's from those skeins that have mostly dark and then just some color on the end, a change of color on the end.
And then this
And I
was
knew
the
I could do
crazy
those
skein.
chevrons because I had played with them before.
And this is the
And then
crazy
that
skein.
kind of, that kind of more messy skein is in the section in between, and it makes kind of a rough and distressed looking little plaid design. And here's the whole wrap from end to end. I ended up knowing that I wasn't going to get the length I wanted, so sight unseen, I ordered a completely different skein to do that section in the middle. Yeah,
That's
which
cool.
I love because it too is not your standard just start an argyle and let it go. It's repositioning to get that stacked series of diamonds in the middle. And there I am wearing it.
So beautiful. So rich looking.
Thank you. I do love wearing it.
Okay, now we're going to have some odds and ends here.
Yeah, I have barrels of swatches. But my mother-in-law used to come through the room when I was knitting, and she'd say, "What are you making?" And I'd say, "It's a sketchbook." So this is a page from the sketchbook. And this is just 3 different visions of the same scarf just hanging up. It was a couple colorways. And this was I think a Malabrigo, which I really like playing with colorways that look like you shouldn't be able to fool them, but
Whoops. Are you there? I think you froze. Let's see if she comes back. You're back.
hello.
You're back.
I can't believe it. Oh my gosh. But with it's really washed out. But what I love about this is that it's very subtle, but the pattern is there.
It's kind
You
of
can see it, right, Suzanne? You can see
yes,
the
it's
diamond shapes in it.
yes, and it's very antique-y looking. It looks like one of those
Yes, it is.
rugs that have been worn, you know?
Yes, that are everywhere right now. Every store
Yes,
you go to buy a rug, they're all the distressed rugs.
yes. Okay, let's look at
Is
this.
that? Oh, yes, that's right. So this was from 2012. our Ravelry group was really active then, and somebody asked me the question, well, you can do this with knitting, can you do it with crochet? And I said, well, of course you can. So I posted this on Ravelry, and then I think I went to work, and when I got home, it was maybe a couple hours later, somebody had put it on Facebook, and then it was picked up by somebody else, and it's everywhere. It was everywhere. So for me, it was my one moment of everybody liked a project, and all it was like a proof of concept. Yes, you can do this with crochet. And this was 2012. But I've done crochet projects since then too. And like I said, there are a lot of people now doing, I think it's called seed stitch in crochet, where you do like a half double and then a chain. And
what is that? It's something crochet. It's like a combination of knitting and crocheting.
Anyway, Marley Bird is, she's a rep for Red Heart, I believe. Mm-hmm. But she has videos that a lot of people have picked up on. She shows them how to do the plain argyles doing crochet, and cool. A lot of people are doing that.
Well, maybe that'd be some place to start. Now, a couple people have mentioned that Laura Bryant also has a class on Blueprint on how to find that area in the yarn where the color repeat starts. Yes.
Yes. And Laura actually, she did a kind of a pattern that was, I don't even know what the date was. It was certainly before I knew about pooling, that she put out with her yarns, and it was doing just the kind of argyle plaids.
Right.
And she definitely, that's right, of course. Yes, Laura teaches classes too, still on this. Yeah, she'd be a great person to go learn from. And she has a book too that is, I can't remember. If you look up Laura Bryant's books on Amazon or wherever you look for books, you'll find one about using multicolor skeins. Okay, these were crocheted, those doing the little four patch and then tiling them. One thing that I thought was really interesting when I crocheted was that the front and the back patterned differently. I'll play with that at some point.
Interesting. This is another one very similar, different shades.
Yes.
Different design.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is them put together.
Yeah. So here too, you could do a nice blanket. A quilt-inspired crocheted blanket. And this is a baby mat I made for my daughter who lives here in Houston, for her little girl who's now 3. It uses 4 different colorways of yarn. What I liked here was, like in that rectangle on the top that's bisected with a little black and white, you have that orange square, and the blues then go up, and they look like they're continuous with the squares above it. Anyway, I loved again how these multiple colorways, because they have the same rhythm, you could find a way to put them next to each other.
See how this fits right here with this diamond?
Yes.
Yes. That's amazing.
Yeah, it fits around yes.
Yeah,
I try to make it fit with the edge too. It just depends where you start. And this too is just kind of a log cabin approach.
This is the last one.
And this was, it uses mosaic crochet. I had a lot of people last year made a beautiful blanket. Oh my gosh. I'm not going to remember her name now. I'm horrified. I'll tell Suzanne, and then she can let everybody know, or somehow. A woman who designed this beautiful blanket, and everybody was making it, and it was my first crochet mosaic project. So It's very comparable to knitting mosaic, where with knitting, you just slide the stitch and then come back to it when you come back to that color. But with crochet, you kind of dip down to the row below and crochet into the row below to make these verticals. But I thought, well, I wonder if I can combine mosaic with plan pooling, and this was my attempt. It's a pillow cover, and I gave it to my daughter, and she has it in her living room. But it's just a couple colorways of just cheap yarn. But I'm happy with the design. And is that it?
Yes. That's an amazing body of work.
Thank you.
It really is. Oh my goodness. And the experimentation and
yeah.
I wish you all could see these and hold them in your hands because the colors are so vibrant and so beautiful. But the pictures were pretty good. They're a pretty good representation of your work.
Good.
So what's your next thing that you want to do?
Well, with this, I'm waiting for yarn to come in, but and I have a lot of yarn here. I just have to get inspired. I'm actually playing with brioche.
Oh yeah.
With creating new motifs. I'm using Nancy Marchant's book of
fresh brioche.
And she and I, when I was at the beginning of this, she and I were emailing, and she's so brilliant and so wonderful and generous. And she was telling me about her approach to design and blocks of, shifting blocks of motifs. And I was very inspired by her. And anyway, so now I'm playing with motifs that she has in the book and putting them together in different ways. So I'm playing with that. But yeah, I just had to put the pooling down for a moment.
Yes, well, we all have those times where we don't have the motivation. We have the thoughts about it, but not the motivation. And then something comes along and pushes you.
Yes.
And gets you back into it again.
Yes.
I'm having the same issue. I'm working on this double knitting scarf that I absolutely love, but I only do like 1 or 2 rows a day. Well, it's going to take a year to get done at that rate, but that's what I'm doing right now. So I just have to go with the flow,
Yes.
So anyway, thank you for being on here, and thank you for sharing your work.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Ever since I took that class, I knew I wanted to share your work, and I have shown pictures of your things to people over time because to see what you can do with these skeins, oftentimes you'll get one of these gorgeous skeins and you just knit with it like a pair of socks and it looks like mud.
Right.
Because there's no rhyme or reason to how the colors match up with each other, and sometimes they don't look so good. The skein is a work of art, but then you knit something and it's not a work of art.
Exactly.
And what you've done is taken these beautiful, beautiful skeins and show them off to their advantage. So it's just
thank you.
So
I did make a sock pattern using this. Well, it's not a pattern; it's a recipe. I'll send you the picture.
Yeah, do that.
It's an argyle sock.
Good, cool.
Knit in the round, but knit back and forth in the round.
Oh, how interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. I'll show it to you. You probably would be able to show me a better way to join it. Whenever I have a technical knitting question, I go to Suzanne.
So anyway, people can use that pooling site. It's called plannedpooling.com.
Yeah.
That's all you have to put it in, and you can use that. It works great. And just experimenting, and don't get frustrated because it can be frustrating in the beginning. You have to have your stitches have to be all the same size. So that's why a lot of times it works better in garter stitch. For people who have a difference in size between their knits and their purls, stockinette doesn't work very well. But if you do it in garter stitch and you're just using all knit stitches, then all the stitches are the same size, and it tends to work better. But it's amazing when it does work. You just want to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. So, okay, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. And I hope
Thank
all of
you.
you that are watching have subscribed to my YouTube channel. Feel free to share this video in any of your social medias and come back and watch again next week. And next week I'm having Anzula. I'm having Calliope from Anzula Fibers for my guest. So come back and watch again. So thank you, Karla. Bye-bye.